The explosive confrontation. You can't build that monstrosity here. It's a violation of HOA Code 13B, section. Her shrill voice cut through the morning air like a chainsaw through cheap siding. Birds scattered from the oak trees lining the property as Karen Delaney stormed up my gravel driveway, her heels stabbing the earth with righteous fury. She wore her trademark pastel sweater set, clipboard clutched in one hand, phone in the other, already dialing 911. I stood by the newly sunk post, shovel in one hand, the other wiping sweat from my brow. The sun had barely crested over the hills, but it was already clear. Peace would not last long on this stretch of land. "Good morning to you too, Karen," I said flatly, tapping the post to ensure it was level. "Beautiful day for a fence." "This is not a fence. It's a violation." She looked around, gesturing wildly as if hoping invisible reinforcements would materialize to back her claim. "This is a suburban community. Your barbed wire lumberjack fantasy doesn't belong here. I've already sent a notice to the board. This property is under HOA jurisdiction." I didn't flinch. "Karen, as I've told you 6 times this month, and as my lawyer has confirmed, my property falls outside the HOA line. Just because it backs up to your precious manicured lawn doesn't mean you get to make the rules here." Her nostrils flared like a bull about to charge. "We'll see about that. I'm calling the sheriff." That made me pause. Not out of fear. No, far from it. I stood to my full height, pulled off my flannel, and revealed the polished gold badge, clipped to my belt. Her finger froze an inch above the screen. Her eyes flicked between my badge and my face, searching for some explanation. I gave her one. "I am the sheriff." Silence. For the first time in the week since I'd moved on to my late father's land, Karen Delaney was speechless. Her lips parted, then closed again. It was like watching a computer crash in real time. You're not... You can't be serious." I folded my arms. "Duly elected, sworn in 2 months ago. Been on the force 15 years. This land's been in my family since 1958. And this fence, completely legal, county approved." She sputtered, still clutching her phone like it might protect her from the truth. I didn't know." I nodded. "You didn't ask." From behind her, a golf cart squeaked down the street. Mr. and Mrs. Beasley, HOA loyalists, slowed as they approached, trying to get a better look at the standoff. I waved politely. Karen didn't. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath, stepping back toward the sidewalk. "It never started," I said, but I was wrong. It had started. I just didn't know how deep the roots of rot had grown under the polished lawns and strict bylaws of this place. Karen was no lone crusader. She was the face of a system, one built on fear, control, and the silencing of anyone who dared to push back. And I had just put up a fence that challenged everything she stood for. By noon, the video was already making rounds on local Facebook groups. Someone, probably a teenager with too much time in a drone, had caught the entire confrontation on camera. The title, HOA Karen versus the Sheriff, Who Wins? Spoiler alert, it wasn't Karen, but in neighborhoods like these, image was everything. And Karen? She wasn't about to let hers be tarnished without a fight. I was inside the house washing up when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. By the 4th time I answered. "Sheriff James." Silence. Then, a familiar voice sweetened to syrup. "Well, hello, Sheriff. I hope we got off on the wrong foot this morning. I'd like to invite you to the HOA board meeting this Friday. We'd love to formally welcome you to the community." "Karen, I'm not part of the HOA. I have no interest in joining it." "Oh, of course not. But still, it's customary to introduce oneself properly to the what? Ruling council of the cul-de-sac?" She laughed, but it sounded more like a blade being sharpened. "I assure you we only want what's best for the neighborhood, and that includes trying to tear down my fence." A pause. "I hope we can be allies, Sheriff. The community respects your position. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings." There it was, the threat behind the smile. I'd seen it before, different faces, different titles. But the playbook was always the same. Thanks for the call, Karen. You have a nice day now. I hung up before she could reply. Later that evening, I stood by the fence, hammer in hand, finishing the last panel before sunset. The sky blazed orange and violet, and the mountains behind my land cast long shadows across the pasture. Peace, until I noticed the lights. 3 cars idled near the edge of my driveway, HOA board members, watching, whispering. My dog, Ranger, barked from the porch. I walked back toward the house, never taking my eyes off them. Let them watch. Let them take notes. I wasn't just building a fence. I was drawing a line, and they'd just found out they couldn't cross it without consequences. To be continued. The backstory unfolds. Let me tell you something about neighborhoods like this. They look peaceful, safe, rows of painted homes with perfect lawns and smiling faces. But scratch the surface. Just scratch it, and you'll find something darker. I didn't always live here. For most of my life, I was out in the field, first in the Army, then 15 years in law enforcement. You learn to read people fast. You learn to smell trouble before it walks through your door. That's why when I first met Karen Delaney, I knew. I knew the second she stepped onto my porch with her forced smile and lemon bars. She wasn't welcoming me. She was sizing me up. This is a tight-knit community, she said. We take pride in how things are done. Funny, I replied. So do I. You see, I hadn't planned on moving back here. My old man passed away unexpectedly. Massive heart attack. Left me the ranch and a whole lot of memories I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But I owed it to him, and to myself, to rebuild what he worked for. The land had fallen into disrepair. Sure, but it was mine. 15 acres just outside the official subdivision lines. It wasn't fancy. No fountain in the front yard or pristine mailbox shaped like a goose. Just trees, hills, and the creaky old barn I helped paint as a kid. Karen didn't care about that. What she did care about was control. And when she found out I wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, oh, that was the beginning of the war. First came the friendly visits. She showed up with copies of the HOA handbook, each edition thicker than the last. She highlighted sections in yellow, underlined others in red. Technically, your mailbox doesn't match the community standard. It's my mailbox on my land. She smiled. But it's visible from the road. I smiled back. So is your attitude. That's when the complaint started. First, it was my dog, Ranger. Barking too much, she claimed. Then it was my old Ford parked too long in the driveway. Then my barn was visually disruptive and might lower property values. Every time I replied with paperwork, county lines, land surveys, zoning approvals. Every time she was proven wrong. But Karen wasn't one to admit defeat. She doubled down. I called in backup, my old buddy Javi. We'd served together overseas. He knew how to spot landmines, both literal and social. He drove up in his beat-up Silverado, took one look at Karen peeking through her blinds and said, "Man, this neighborhood got more surveillance than a military base." He wasn't wrong. The HOA had installed cameras for safety. Every street corner, every clubhouse, even the tennis courts had a blinking red eye. We got to work rebuilding the barn, clearing brush, and pouring the concrete footing for what would eventually be my new fence. That's when things escalated. We started getting visits from city inspectors, 3 in a week. One said I didn't have the proper erosion permits. Another said the barn violated a height restriction, even though I just restored it to its original specs. The third handed me a cease work order signed by someone named Devin Holt. I did some digging. Devin wasn't a city official. He was Karen's nephew. And more importantly, he wasn't authorized to sign anything. They were faking citations now. I confronted him. "Look," he said, adjusting his collar. "We're just trying to keep the area nice. You're bringing in heavy equipment, putting up industrial fencing. It's not what people are used to. And what people are used to is being bullied by your aunt." He didn't answer. They'd done this before. I found out later that over the past 5 years, at least 4 families had left early after facing similar harassment. A single mom with twin boys, a retired teacher, a disabled Marine with PTSD. All gone. All replaced by approved buyers. usually friends of the HOA board, and now I was the next target. Karen got bolder. One day, I found my water line mysteriously cut. The next ranger disappeared, turned up locked inside the HOA clubhouse, dehydrated, scared, but alive. When I confronted Karen, she acted shocked. Oh no, how awful. Someone must have left the door open. Funny how it locks from the outside. She didn't even blink. You know what they say, evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a pastel cardigan and drinks iced tea at 10 a.m. sharp. Still, I kept things legal. I documented everything. Pictures, logs, filed police reports. Even if I was the sheriff, I still had to do it by the book. Karen wasn't working, alone. That much became clear. There was Dave, the HOA treasurer, always nodding behind her like a wind-up toy. Lisa, the events chair, who smiled in public but helped organize the smear campaign online. And of course Devin, her weasel nephew, who loved flashing fake authority like a badge. I had friends in the city records office. When I asked them to look into recent zoning changes, they found something interesting. A development proposal for my land, filed 6 months before I inherited it. They had plans for my ranch. Big ones, commercial ones. That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to bully me out. They were trying to force me to sell. Karen had tried being nice at first. She came over with an offer, cash, way below market value. This land could be a liability, she said. Why not just move into the neighborhood? We've got an empty lot on Sycamore Lane. I can get you a deal. I laughed in her face. You think I'd give you this land after everything you've pulled? Her smile vanished. Don't be foolish, Sheriff. Sometimes it's better to go quietly. And there it was. The threat beneath the veneer. The dagger wrapped in lace. I thought about my father. He worked this land until the day he died. Raised cattle. Built the original barn with his bare hands. He wasn't perfect. Lord knows we fought, but he loved this place. I wasn't about to let a gang of suburban tyrants erase that legacy. I started building the fence. Thick timber, heavy posts, reinforced steel mesh to keep out wildlife, and Karen. She hated it. Said it ruined the view. I told her to plant a hedge. She said it didn't fit the aesthetic of the community. I reminded her again. I'm not part of the community. But Karen didn't believe in boundaries. She believed in domination, so she called the cops. Imagine her surprise when I answered the dispatch myself. The calls didn't stop. Noise complaints, unusual activity reports, even anonymous tips claiming I was running illegal operations. Out of my barn, we investigated them all. You know what we found? Absolutely nothing. But that was never the point. Karen didn't want truth. She wanted control. She wanted to make me feel isolated, alone, surrounded. But I wasn't alone. Word started to spread. A few of the quieter neighbors began nodding as I walked past. One slipped me a note. They did it to my brother, too. Stay strong. Another brought over homemade bread and said, don't let them win. Even some of the teens in the neighborhood started calling Karen the dictator. One of them, Maya, bright kid, posted a TikTok of Karen yelling at a raccoon for stepping on her lawn. It went viral. Suddenly, the tides were shifting, but that only made Karen more dangerous. You see, people like her, when their power is challenged, they don't retreat. They retaliate, and I knew, deep down, that the worst was yet to come. Because Karen wasn't just angry anymore. She was embarrassed. And for someone like her, public humiliation is the ultimate sin. One night, I got home to find my front gate wide open. The lock had been cut. Ranger was on edge, growling, sniffing the air. I checked the property. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. But something had changed. They were done playing games. They were sending a message. Javi found the bolt cutters tossed into the bushes. We dusted them for prints. Got one hit. Devin Holt. The evidence was building. And me? I was preparing. Because This wasn't just a feud, this was war, and I was about to fight it with every tool I had. Badge, law, and truth. To be continued. The conspiracy deepens. You ever feel like you're being watched? Not just watched, but tracked? Like someone out there knows your every move, every time you open your front door or pick up a bag of dog food? That feeling had been creeping up on me for weeks, and now it was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore, it was chess, and Karen was playing a long, quiet game, moving pieces I hadn't seen until now. It all started with a single envelope. No return address. Just left on the seat of my truck one morning. Inside, a copy of a planning document, detailed sketches, Phase 1, Community Expansion Initiative. I scanned the layout and froze. There, outlined in red ink, was my ranch. Every square foot, my barn, my house, my driveway, all labeled with their future replacements, luxury townhomes. They weren't trying to force me out just because I was difficult. They were trying to pave over my entire legacy, and they had help. On the back of the plan were signatures, city council members, zoning board officials, some names I didn't recognize, and one I definitely did. Greg Matheson, realtor, former HOA president, Karen's old college buddy. I was furious. But fury only works if you aim it. So I made some calls. Friends in City Hall, an old flame who now worked in the zoning office. I needed more than righteous anger. I needed proof. And proof came fast. Karen had been funneling HOA funds into a consulting firm called KMD Development. Turns out KMD stood for Karen, Matheson, and Devon. Yeah, that Devon. Nepo baby turned fake inspector turned full-time criminal. They were using HOA dues to fund legal filings, surveys, and lobbying to get my land reclassified. All under the radar. I took it to the district attorney. She looked it over and said, "This goes deep, Sheriff, and it's going to get uglier before it gets better." That night I got a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." I showed it to Javi. He narrowed his eyes. Time to turn up the heat. We set up security cameras, real ones, not the fake plastic domes Karen liked to install for show. These had infrared motion sensors, backup batteries. 2 days later, we caught Devon on tape, climbing over my fence at 3 a.m. He walked around the barn, looked right into the camera, and flipped it off. We filed the footage with the DA. That made it official, criminal trespass, and then came the retaliation. First, Ranger got sick. Vet said he'd ingested something toxic, rat poison most likely. He barely made it. I sat with him on the floor for 12 hours, feeding him ice cubes, whispering, "Stay with me, boy, stay." The next day, my mailbox exploded. Not figuratively. Someone had packed it with fireworks, burned the whole post. The flames charred the grass clear up to the road. The fire chief took one look and said, "This was intentional. You want me to call the state fire marshal?" "Call the feds if you have to," I told him. Because now it wasn't just harassment, it was war. I went back through the HOA's public filings, found a few discrepancies, money missing, unapproved expenditures. I passed them to my contact at the newspaper, a columnist named Dana Lee, known for sinking her teeth into corrupt politics like a terrier with a stake. Her article dropped 2 days later. Ranch versus HOA. Sheriff blows whistle on corrupt subdivision. Takeover. It hit like a thunderclap. The neighborhood went into a tailspin. People started asking questions. Where had their dues gone? Why was Karen pushing for a new clubhouse when the old one barely had working AC? And what exactly was KMD Development? Karen held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but that didn't matter, because someone recorded it. The audio landed in my inbox the next morning, Karen yelling, Lisa crying, Dave trying to deflect, and at the end Karen saying, "If he won't sell, then we'll make him." Game over. I brought the audio to the DA, added it to the growing case file. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a press conference. I stood at the front gates of my ranch, media trucks lined up on the gravel road, microphones pointed at my face. "My name is Sheriff Matt Easton," I began. And I am here to say that corruption has no place in this county, not in our cities, not in our schools, and certainly not in our neighborhoods. I laid it out. The forged permits, the misused funds, the secret plans to seize private land. Karen watched from her porch, pale, silent, but she wasn't done. That night someone slashed Javi's tires, put sugar in his gas tank. Then came the break-in. I came home to find my back door kicked in, files tossed everywhere. But they didn't take anything. They weren't after money. They were after evidence. Too late. I'd already backed everything up. Cloud. Flash drive. A hard copy locked in my gun safe. The next morning, the DA filed formal charges: fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, criminal mischief. Karen was arrested in front of the HOA clubhouse, wearing pearls in denial. Devin ran. Last I heard, he was caught, trying to board a bus to Arizona with a duffel bag full of cash and half a Subway sandwich. Greg Matheson claimed ignorance. I was just a silent partner, he said. Turns out his silence bought him a full audit and a lifetime HOA ban. But even as the arrests were made, I didn't feel victory. Not yet, because the damage was done. Ranger had almost died. My home had been violated. And for what? Greed. That's the thing about corruption. It doesn't announce itself. It seeps in, smiles in your face, offers you cookies and poison in the same breath. But when you shine a light on it, it can't survive. And I was just getting started. To be continued. The breaking point. Sometimes justice doesn't feel like a gavel hitting the bench. Sometimes it feels like silence. After Karen's arrest, you'd think there'd be a celebration. That people would rally. That the neighborhood would finally breathe. But no. There was only tension. Tension like a taut wire, stretched too far and one vibration away from snapping. Whispers replaced laughter. Doors closed a little faster. And the eyes, those judgmental HOA eyes, they weren't sure who the enemy was anymore. And I wasn't sure either. Because after the conspiracy came to light, after the press conference and arrests, things didn't get better. They got worse. Let's start with the obvious. Karen got bail. Some lawyer cousin swooped in from Dallas, paid her bond, and she strutted back into the subdivision like she was the queen of suburbia. House arrest, ankle monitor. Didn't matter. She stood on her porch every morning, sipping a double-shot macchiato like she'd just won a civil lawsuit against gravity. And then she started talking, spinning her version, claiming I'd set her up, that I wanted control of the HOA, that this was a revenge campaign because she had dared to bring order to the Wild West property next door. The neighborhood split like a lightning bolt. Half of them stood with me. The old-timers, the veterans, the people who remembered when this town was dirt roads and handshake deals. But the others? They listened to her, because Karen was good at one thing, pretending to be the victim. I started getting complaints. Official. Letters. Suddenly, my barn lights were too bright. My dogs were too loud. One anonymous complaint said my horse looked menacing. A horse. Menacing. But it wasn't funny. Not really. Because one night, someone opened the pasture gate. Midnight. No moon. Ranger and Lucy got out, took off toward the highway. I found them by the guardrails, dazed and shaking. One more minute and I'd be burying them. I didn't cry. Not then. I cried later. In the barn. In the dark. Knees on the hay, hands clutching the halter like a lifeline. Why? Won't this stop? I whispered. And that's when I realized this wasn't about property, or politics, or fences. This was about power, about control, about pride. Karen couldn't stand losing. Not publicly, not to someone she saw as beneath her, and she was willing to burn down everything to reclaim her throne. Even her own people. Lisa came to me in tears. She said if I didn't sign the letter condemning you, she'd call CPS on me. Said she saw my son alone in the yard. Matt, he's 8. He was playing catch with the dog, that's it. She handed me the letter. A typed formal HOA memo demanding my removal from the subdivision. only it wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had named Javi, said he was an unlicensed contractor endangering property values, claimed he had violated multiple aesthetic ordinances with the new fence. The fence, the one she screamed about in the first place. Javi read the letter, folded it slowly, didn't say a word. Then he walked to his truck. "Where you going?" I asked. "Back, to my mom's. For a bit, I need time." Time. Time for what? To think? To breathe? Or to wonder if being my friend was worth the target it painted on his back? I didn't stop him. I just watched him go. And then came the worst blow of all. My badge. The county board called an emergency meeting. The chair, a long-faced man named Davis who never liked me, opened with, "Due to ongoing legal distractions and public perception issues, we need to discuss Sheriff Easton's ability to serve effectively." Public perception. The same public I had. Bled for, fought for, protected. They didn't suspend me, but they reviewed me. Weekly check-ins. Oversight on my public statements. A committee to monitor community engagement, which is code for watch your back. I walked out of that meeting feeling smaller than I ever had in uniform, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my dad. He was on his boat in Florida, retired, half sunburned and half drunk. "You still got that shotgun?" he asked. "That's not why I called. I know you want to quit." I didn't answer. He sighed, then quit. "But if you're calling to ask if it gets easier, it don't. You just get stronger. Or harder. Maybe both." He hung up, and I sat there, alone, with my silence, my thoughts, my rage, until I felt something shift. Resolve, because you don't rebuild by hiding, you rebuild by fighting. So I went door to door. Not as a sheriff. As a neighbor. I showed them the documents, the evidence, the plans for demolition and luxury development, the audits. I apologized to the ones who got dragged into it, promised better. Some turned me away, but some didn't. And slowly, the tide began to turn. One neighbor mowed my lawn. Another brought over lasagna. Lisa started a petition to remove Karen permanently from HOA involvement. And Javi, he came back. "Couldn't leave you hanging," he said. We shook on it. Said nothing else. Because that's what men do when they forgive each other without saying the word. But the storm wasn't over. Karen had one more card to play. She filed a civil suit, defamation, harassment, emotional distress. Her lawyer read it on live TV. "My client has suffered undue persecution, media harassment, and reputational damage due to false claims made by Sheriff Easton, who, we argue, used his office to launch a personal vendetta." I laughed when I heard it. Not because it was funny, because it was desperate. She knew the tide was turning. She was drowning, but drowning people thrash. They grab whatever they can, and she still had some believers. So I prepared. I compiled every document, every photo, every timestamp. I rehearsed with the DA. I gave a sworn statement. I braced myself for the courtroom, because I knew the next battle wouldn't be fought with fences. It would be fought with truth. But truth has a cost, and I was about to find out just how high it could go.